I want to go back to the question around profiles, and we didn't really dive into that. I'd love to understand who are the folks that you're connecting with? Who are the lenders that you're connecting with? And I'm sure obviously you can't meet them, on a daily basis or anything, but who are they? Men, women, young, old? What does that look like?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I haven't thought of the demographics. I think actually that's interesting. We haven't analyzed, like, say, by gender
Okay.
or age, but just from drawing from memory, it is a
Yeah.
wide range. We have, I mean, I don't think we have very young people because they have to be accredited.
Sure.
I would
Right.
say maybe youngest is maybe in their 30s, so something like that, right? And then in terms of other profiles, they have to be accredited. The mindset is actually very interesting to see, and I've just really loved studying investors' behavior because of the
Another
flexibility.
connection.
I'm like, okay, I gesture a lot, and I think I gestured this to indicate if this is on the philanthropic side, like I'm ready to give my money away.
Yeah.
This is the impact investment, but I still want market rate return.
Yeah.
There's a lot of thought process people go through in the middle. I'll give you
Hmm.
an example. Typically, our investors come in and say, I'm not that interest rate sensitive. I see that you say the market rate is 5%. Okay, 4.5,
Hmm.
as an example, right? I want to be philanthropic, but this is really my investment as well. We've had the privilege of talking to some more unique investors because they reach like, I want to anticipate it. One actually is a person who is retired. He knows that he doesn't need his $1 million IRA. And I have other money. This money I wanted to go to nonprofits. In fact, he thought we were a little too stringent in terms of in our underwriting. Like, why are you qualifying them, kind of like a bank? We said, well, we need to make sure that they can pay you back. And he said, no, no, no. Okay, so this is his mindset. I want to lend this money out to nonprofits. If they can pay me back, great. If they can't pay me back and they go belly up in 6 months, I feel like I've helped them do more good work in the 6 months, right? They otherwise would not have been able to.
Hmm.
So there are people like that, and which nonprofit would not want more of that person, right? In as a supporter. So our flexibility allows both types, or actually all types of investors like that. So speaking of profile, really is a wide range. We've had people reach out, I want to support that nonprofit that way. Can you help us structure it?
That's great. That's great. And when kind of pulling back the lens a little bit, I'm just wondering, again, kind of this big marketplace of impact investing, and how would you bucket the players in impact investing? I know it's kind of a crazy question, but how would you think about that? How, like, what are the buckets, and then maybe some players underneath?
Yeah. Well, as anything, we can matrix this to death. So without naming names, I will say that I see generally there are impact investments that have their set program.
Hmm.
We have a program that we've set aside $100 million for affordable housing.
Hmm.
Apply if you qualify, you get 2% rate, something like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
It's fairly binary, right?
Hmm.
So in or you're out. Then
Hmm.
there are conduits that work with a number of these impact investments where they are, like their impact capital something, usually it's in their name, impact
Right.
capital something, and behind them are multiple programs. So by working with them, you may be able to tap into multiple types of programs, and you can pick and choose. Then flipping it to the other side, like a CDFI, clearly impact investment, CDFIs um, have really done a good job in networking, engaging bank investors. So bank capital come to them, foundation capital can come to them. They haven't really cracked the nut of how to engage individuals. And that is, speaking from experience, a very tough nut to crack.
It
So
is.
we try to work with wealth advisors. We
Mm-hmm.
try to work with philanthropic consultants just to
Mm-hmm.
make our services known. And if they encounter the right type of clients, then we help them bridge them to the right impact investment.
That's great. So I'm going to play off this theme of the different buckets and innovation and the major players. So so there is a thread here. So bear with me. But when we look at finance and then we look at the industry and when you even look at IT, let's be honest, like who comes to mind? It's probably someone that looks more like me, right? It's white male, maybe a little bit younger than me, but typically in finance it's male dominated. So and we were talking about impact investing, and so I'd love to hear a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of women-led organizations and women in impact investing. What does that look like? And then let's kind of even further refine that and and understand what is it, are you seeing women of color in impact investing too? So let's start with just kind of the male-dominated world of finance, and what you see as an Asian woman.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Asian American woman, coming into a room and with like a bunch of white men in suits. So what does it look like in terms of impact investing? Let's just start there.
All right. So I'll even tell you a preview. It's a good story. My career has been in investment management. Like I said before, I've worked at Schwab, and I have studied and received the CFA designation. So that puts me, thank you. That puts me in the category of being in the industry where it is very male dominated. And so I was very, very used to it. I would go to conferences and I'm explaining my personal experience.
Yeah,
And I
no.
always take it as a given that I need to initiate conversation with others. And people don't really come up to me to initiate conversation really, unless it's Asian female. Okay. I mean,
Oh, really? Interesting.
right. We seek like, oh, we don't know who we're going to talk to.
Yep.
Everybody looks a little intimidating in suits. So, sometimes, well, of course, then we huddle together. But we end up
And then
needing
the
to
men
develop.
are like, oh, well, that's just the Asian ladies over there doing their thing.
So, right. As I mature in my career and all that, I realized, of course, we need to break it up and establish new networks. But it always takes me taking the initiative. Even just a side funny story, I was at a career fair and lots of tables, I was a hiring person and there are all kinds of people swarming in that place. And my table was relatively empty, right? I don't look startup-y, I don't look like a hiring manager. So even one person walked up, kind of looked at my signs like, all right, I'll bite. That's kind of what we're used to. Okay, so just a perspective. It's like even when they come to talk to a potential hiring manager, we get that kind of treatment sometimes. But back to the impact investment. So I'm used to going to investment conferences with high power, CIOs and all that, and I initiate conversation. I walk into a huddle of white male, and then I start, I join their conversation or something. I'm used to that. 3 years ago was the first time I went to the SRI conference, and they were celebrating the 29th year, so it's a very successful conference, and I was so blown away by how welcoming that conference was compared to other conferences I was used to. It's still an investment conference, it's SRI conference. There's still a lot of bankers and investment managers, vendors who are walking around, but people came up to me and said, hey, so what do you do? Like, wow,
Wow.
this is new. I've never had that happen before. And so in this space, I think people are more open-minded. They recognize that they're doing good, and whether consciously or unconsciously, they're in general more embracing, more welcoming, and more connected, knowing that race, gender isn't really
Right.
should not be a barrier.
Right. And so I'm just going back to this idea of you walking into the SRI conference. who was in the room? Men, women, women of color, African American women, transgender, Native American. Like, I suspect that gets smaller and smaller. But who are you seeing who's in your world?
Yeah, it's very diverse. In fact,
Great.
the SRI conference, I think, is successful in getting diversity in the audience because they lead by example. So I joined the advisory board for a couple of years to plan events and who to invite. The year I joined, they already have had a policy in place that whoever's on stage, whether it's a panel or something, or a single speaker, no, or fireside chat, two or more people, it needs to have diversity. It cannot be all white male. I think, what was it? It cannot be all white male. Then the year I joined, they said, let's do better. Let's not just say that it has not just gender bias, all white female is not good. So let's make sure that we have ethnicity diversity. So oftentimes on panels we see African Americans, Latinx representation, and Native Americans, because in impact investment, a lot of it really needs to go and support the Native American communities.
Hmm.
So I love it. I walk in is unlike any investment conference I had ever seen.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for just feeling comfortable with yourself and just walking in and saying like, hi, I'm Vivienne, or and God forbid somebody actually comes up to you and introduces themselves. So I think it's a wonderful experience and a wonderful lesson for all of us to be open and say hello to somebody that you don't know. And it's always an interesting story that you learn, because we're all here to learn, correct?
Yes, and it builds character. I think, if we didn't get pushed, I think we wouldn't be where we are. So we all need to stretch, no matter our age or gender or ethnicity. I think being pushed a little bit, sometimes it's uncomfortable, or oftentimes it's uncomfortable. But if
Hmm.
we see the opportunity, I think we better ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Vivienne, any closing words or closing thoughts based on our conversation? I know we covered everything from fintech to racial disparity to gender equality. So, but any closing thoughts that you'd like to share from today?
Yeah, well, yeah, we touched on a lot. And if there's one thing I want to say, maybe I'll again use a quick example of how I started Lendonate.
Great.
I thought this idea was going to be just hugely popular with foundations. You and I have talked about this, and you're a huge pioneer and an early adopter in
That's,
helping foundations
thank you.
recognize the need of their role in impact investment. So if there's any parting word, I hope that more foundations, and there are a lot of willingness, foundations tend to move a little slowly, but just by the way that they're structured, and that's fine. But I hope that each foundation really take the next step, wherever they are, take the next step in supporting impact investment with their own portfolios, not be too shy about telling their donor advised fund donors that there are plenty of worthy impact investments out there, because there are many billions of dollars, of course, managed under foundations, endowments, and donor advised funds. If everybody can just step up 5% of allocate 5% of their investment towards impact investment, if they were already at 5, step it up to 10, then I think that's huge impact already without much of anything else, because mission is aligned, investment goals are aligned, and now we just need the people from within to help push it forward.
That's great. Yeah, and just to say too that it's a big tent. There are a lot of folks out there that are supporting this effort all along the food chain, from starting up with foundations, which is what we support at Community Capital Advisors, and helping create those impact investment funds, to the beneficiaries, the nonprofits and low-income communities, and then everything in between, Lend Donate, and others, on how best to support communities that are in need of capital. So I appreciate you for leading the way in innovation, Vivienne, and I appreciate you for also just being a leader in the field. So thank you, and what a pleasure to spend time with you this morning.
Thanks for having me. And Mark, thanks for always being a great ally in so many ways.